Kuna Tamale Mirundi buli Wednesday morning njagala okulamusa oyina mukwano gwo akola kuli ham mukwezi wa Muruka bamita Rugambwa Rugambwa ngamenti ndabiranga nnyo musajja oyo yansanze mu supermarket nanga nti nawe nkulebyeko mbuntu tuli bantu ba bulijjo tutambula yansanze mu supermarket wali ku Nakumat je beta Carrefour kati nanga nti ndabira nnyo mukukuna Tamale Mirundi era kati ateko kubasanyuse mukuru Rugambwa yao ku Harris International.
Yes. Waliwo mukwano gwange ababe ekibiina ekinsabira. Yagenda bwotuuka yo mugamba asomeza Zabbuli 3:8.
Psalm 32:8. Jemba nsoma.
Gisome tulabe. Oba yerimu okusonyiwa.
Oyagala kusonyiwa oyagala ki? Zabbuli 3:2 n'olunyi olw'omunaana kanji bikulana Zabbuli 3:2 n'olunyi olw'omunaana. Bible egamba bweti. Nakuyigirizanga era nakulaganga mu kkubo ly'onooyitangamu. Nakuteesezanga ebigambo eriiso lyange liriko ggwe. Bible bweti bwegambye.
Ate kituufu.
Eriiso lyange liriko ggwe Katonda bw'ati bw'agamba. Obukakafu bunaabwa.
Nzongera nembaga nti bane situkola mirimu. Nti naye bw'ofunira tukola mirimu gya Mukama.
Ebo bakubuuza.
Ebo tubuuza mu mufunira wa. Neno babuuza ndi kusaasira gye yatiikirira ennyo ne bukedde n'akulaganga amukubira saluti omuserikale aliwa mu politics aliwa
kusaasira kusaasira taka kwa video ano ngagazaako kwatula ekitiibwa kye kya presidential
mugamba mutya
nanga okusipendinga ekigambo presidential
mugamba nti abulanga kisiikirize
sikirize oyingira mu nyumba nga kiri awo kyonna
tukirizanga kubulanga kisiikirize mu byobufuzi tetubulanga kisiikirize
banji ababuza wanange bisikirize
era nze ndi musanyufu nnyo kati nebongamba nti sibula omuddu wagende kati ogwaffe guwedde lwaki nti pulezidenti ategedde nti ba mu nnyumba ye nga Bayibuli bwegamba
nti abalabe balibanga ba mu nnyumba
abaire be bamusabiri ba mu nnyumba ye kuba beerondamu omusika ng'obudde bukyali
nga president
bwene weewuunya nti lwaki awagira Museveni akubwa bukubwa buli awagira Museveni
bano abaana beewa obusika nga bebakuba
mukoye w'obusika naye kyaliko ate nze era ngamba wadde munsomera Bayibuli yatwala 5 billion zezangobya n'abatazirese mu mutima mulungi
ne Bayibuli olimanyi otya
empologoma ejja kuzikima
olimanyi otya azirese mu mutima
ejjagere wanaloyise yasame aziteekemu tetuli ku byakuzannya kuba mu bugerere bulowooza singa bo be baafuna situation ensibisa mu kkomera bankoze buli kimu kyonna nga tebamanyi ndi ku mirimu gya Mukama kakati kankubuulire essimu zino ziraba sebo oyo sheeka omulaba sheeka yabadde akulira ekibinja abadde alina ekibinja ne bapastors abamu benda kunyumizaako luli tibabadde bakuyita ono ogundi eri feeke ya mukazi bamuyita Nambozi si ye mutuufu ye si musheeke mwakolera omufere
musumya Nambozi kyamira era nawulidde bana ba UCC nga bagamba bagenda kansolinga miliyoni z'amasimu zitya miliyoni 2 anti nze ne bwojjako simu kaadi n'ogisuula mba nakunywezezza dda odiyo njiwulira ono majidu yeseeka kati atakozesumya Nambozi
asokola kweno ya Nambozi kwakolera kati bamagezi ge babadde bakola bakabizza ensi eno kino ekitabo kyakubiri saakulaga kiri ebimu 400
kati tubeerera ki
nze nane audio Petro City anti nkulaga nti esimu yeno eno ye network kubakolera nenkulaga n'emirundi yakaji kubako ne audio byayogererako Petro City eyekyengerayo yagaddewo yebadde besi yaabwe
akolagana nnyo n'abasiraamu amannya agasinga kuno gendengera ga kisiraamu
anti bababba bakkiriza nnyo omukristaayo bamubbira mu bapasita tibannanga mu kanisa muno mulimu alina kyatunda nti kireete tukisabire mu basiraamu banaye waliwo alina kyatunda ti kireete tukisabire lunaku lwajjo yasiibya nkubira essimu
ono yenyini
anti atya ate kati waliwo ekintu ky'omuntu kye batwala ate temubavuma oli yajanga nagamba mu church because it is abusing trust mu church omusajja yajanga mu church nayigiriza n'agamba ti mu kanisa muno muli mwayina kyatunda nti sebo poloti yanjitunda girete njisabire kakati bakutwala wa sheikh amba omulombi wa dua bana ababbi abalala bakutwalayo kakati mubobe nyine mwe mwali mu ekibinja kikulirwa senior police officer era aba police bonna ba osaba badde ekengerawo bonna yabajeyo ate obagirawo wa kubanga ambalina ne audio kakati kobotukayo nga sente bazikusasula milioni 4 nti ye ngoli akubira esimu nti sente bazikusasudde kyenna kusabira zirete ziwomukisa era esimu ezo zikulaga nti abeeyitanga ba blockers babeeranga mu kifo kimu ne sheikh oba ne pastor esimu zikulaga tulaba network besa mujita yakuzana miso yajja kulema miso tuli ku mirimu gya mukama tulaba network eno yonna nti esimu eyo eri mu center olaba network yayo
ona ali mu center
ali mu center olaba amasimu gonna gakubago
gatambula gagenda
gakulaga
mathematics ali muno simutegera mutegera ndaba mwenkaga mwenya nkaga mwenya
ezo ge masimu ge yakakuba
asatu mwenyezo
yago ge masimu goba wakakuba miso yajja kulema
kwegiraba 17 10
misawa zokubiddeko nibyeyogedde
kwegamba wanoziraga incoming and outgoing
kakati abo tebakuwa yadde 10 endagaano bagisigaza eri golowooza nti abakuguze balala olumala okukola endagaano nti ntunze ennyumba yange milioni 4 ono naakuyita kati bo bakugamba twakusasudde no my network proves that you were in the same place, you were in communication ekitegeeza tewali kyemwagula sente za mumwazisigaza waliwo gye babadde bagenze mbu kuyingira nyumba babalezi nze nawenyeza emotoka okuyooja teri ava mu nyumba ye there was no transaction because the buyers, the so-called buyers and those who paid for you to sell your property were the same and the broker was the same according to this data teri afulumamu okukwata jokugoba munyi n'abaziyingira edda mubafulumye tewali kye batunda ezo simu 400 oleetemu ate baavu bayitirivu natulidde omukazi omanyi natulidde omukazi mukulu wa ssomero
ababba sente zino zonna ate baavu
I looked at this woman she has a masters ayina essomero amanyi president nimugaa nti how did you follow pray to this group
egobabye
nti kusoma I believed my pastor
yesiga pastor yesiga msumba
bawe oba nti nyumba yagisigazanga yeweerera abaana neyibawe yagirimu neyibawe yagirimu yagala don't call me before don't abuse Mr. Mirundi
ani
omukazi we yangambye
siru bwesige
mu pastor ndiye nali ngana
msumba kuchituti wambulira enjiri bwa kuzalaga bikola zabuli ya 328 twinza government kyagenda okugati kiri
kakati lyava mu nyumba ye badduke buddusi aje yatwala ennyumba ye kubya fake ebyo you come to me nkulage nti n'okwogera kwennyini mbakwata miso yajja kulema ate nze tebakugambangako kati manye ekiri mu yeso kyebava balwana baagala katabaaza akulira ono wamini basigaze kontakisi zaabwe ate ekituufu kiriwa clarification let katabaaze bring his appointment later and we solve the problem because the president must write an appointment to you
tuchewa bwewe kicha WhatsApp
bajozi bayina obujozi mu mitwe
kubanga
ati nkubulidde
kati okamanyi nti ali amumyoka
yes tamanyi naye tebagala mutani wa Amini lwaki ye tebajja mumufuga kakati atenga nze mutani wa Amini mwagala nnyo lwa nsonga Western Island yonna agimaze era kakati omuntu ayina okukaba amaziga ge ani tetayinza kudda mu byabufuzi because tetuwangulangako West Nile. There was a time president bamumazayo additional for the week ne bamuga nti tukubanja ekintu eki tukubanja egundi ekyuma mu dwaliro Museveni spent an additional days minister wa health na chireta tebamu wakalulu West Nile temu wakalulu era yabaga ntimba wabuwi niti mujje kumpa nkimanyi kuba yagoba amini kati mutani wa amini aze katabaza kuba ya group yemwe yabu moni ye yabu obo tribalistic oba red people obo kuba busekale wone gap mu bubira
red people
group ye mu ajikubye na leta inaje ajitwala ni umonete gulo yakubye where did the teachers money go? You are stupid. What type of editor are you? Sent a president yazikwata nazibawa bwe bazibawa nibagenda bakwata omukazi oyo akuliye ekitongole ne bamuga nti sayini nganti tukuwadde billion 10 zijja kujera mu 3 instruments omukazi bamuwake $1,500,000 zanguzi sente tezagendayo kakati abana bamaze okudda mu ssomero successfully monitor incites the teachers to demand their money lwakito lugala close the newspaper kuba Museveni talina paper nemu babazanyira ku psychology kana bwekakubaka nakomu vision ako bwekakuba kabukedde ne kakuba nakabukedde ne kakuba nibuli kabujogensi
babijabi bakuba
ono omuvuka yabibawa mukodomi wa Museveni lwabwogwe ya controlling amawulire government yagishinja musezala wa amani ye ekipulaningira muli nawandika katabo nti this young omuvubuka ono yagenda ko ne kasenyina training
President Museveni akimanyi nti mukodomi
afuluma kati afuluma talinga mu luyumba lwanko alifuluma mu March alifuluma mu yagamba nti afuluma kebweru fuluma kebweru Museveni muita wa kuzanya olaba atunulya Kutesa bwati Museveni was the snakes out of their horrors. Do you think nti Museveni tasobola kulagira muganda we nti vamu
muganda wa ine
naye kakati bombi bakiriza nti ye Kutesa agamba najja muganda wa mu America wamujja muggulu mbu najja omwana nga mu America walwana amutunulira bwati era bannegulo basindise delegation bamusindikidde delegation ngekulirwa professor nkukubireko ebyabaddeyo nga bamugamba don't escalate the conflict omusajja atuyinako data Mirundi yatunoona fellowship yagikubadde we don't know when he started capturing us
bagende wa honorable Kutesa bamusaba bakolere ki
bamwegayirire anti bamwegayirire alime naye azimbye yewazembwa ayina DP abagambwa ayina DP ayina people power can put power on the street kwebiri mbibakubire
ono mwana
nedambe kubira professor chairman ye yagambye chairman umanyi chairman abana bamuwereza messages ne bamugamba nti kulinya mukalulu n'oyogera nga tukukubako wali olamuza emitima gy'abantu ne babiwereza ne mukazi we chairman yagambye nti ekiri ewange nze ne mukazi wange tetwogeraganya nti oba Mirundi yebiwe professor namukasi Mirundi tali malicious kutuukaawo bano ba people kati yagambye bwemulaba ali mu kalulu nga tayogera yagambye siyinza kwogera yagambye tajja kwogera tajja kulabikako ye kaseza nomination zawedde tagenda kulabikako
agenda kola
naye yali ayingiramu waliwo n'omulala akayingiddemu ali saidi eno naye bamuli bubi ebya organ naye yabirimu naye yalamuzanga emitima gy'abantu
be bantu kati abasafaringira mu kino ekintu omuwala musherule
alogansi ye nti mbwayagala bwa deputy speaker kuba olanya yakubwa tamanyi nti olanya yakubwa Ulanya tachasobola kubeera deputy speaker oba speaker why Ulanya chief justice mukyoli deputy governor munozana yiso mufunyemu munozana bombi ubona muyisano banani atoba deputy gonde and the three pillars of the state be gonde occupied by people from the same region ikitegeza unubamu kuba kati muwala wa Kutesa mbuye deputy speaker nankabirwa prime minister nankabirwa mbusente zikola money will do the very arrogant fellows tuwali kye batakola kwa buli kimu kyonna bakikola bajoze ensi yonna ne bagifukira omusulu kakati balowooza nti buli muntu yenna once you power money nti Kutesa can wrestle Museveni Kutesa when did you nga gwe wali ku side mu peace talks Kutesa Attorney General Okero nga ali ku side y'Okero nebitandisali nga ali ku side y'Okero Paulo Semogere nga ali ku side y'Okero
against Museveni
era Museveni bwe yatuuka e Nairobi yajjira na munyonyi ya gundi ono musajja eriwe gundi ono Taine Roland nga era yali akutula olupapula lwa Standard newspaper nga Taine Roland yalowooza ajja mufuga abagagga bagenda ne bainvestinga mu bintu Museveni yakwata Semogere mu ngalo bwati n'amugamba nti we have seen much Museveni n'amuddamu nti we have seen more of all the people abali mu peace talks Museveni yakwata Semogere mu ngalo yekka yakwata ku Kutesa era aba UPC bakugambanga if Museveni says that he was rigid let him talk to Kutesa nti Kutesa aibalo kasi bajja kuba empire yonna bagijjewo kubanga mmwe gwene bwogamba ba professor bagamba mbonona ayina ebyamakono Museveni tebakikolako mugonde mukyogamu ne bagamba nti ebintu byonna Museveni yabitulagira teyita akakiiko ka gundi oyo namubulya byonna nga bye bakolanga nga bakola birala Museveni muyita bwa muzannyo nze bwentira Museveni wali bwamu abantu abonna bayabukanye nabo bambabazi baani ani yali agenti nakukwatya ko milioni za dola 10 kutwalira ku account yegeni tunodi akataboke abantu bonna bafuusa ab'omutawaana afterwards Museveni abamuyensolinga mu passing
abafuusa ab'omutawaana abongera konga abayita
katono I think when I was translating obati nyefunza yamwogera ko Murundi kumubana all of the people who do cause trouble in the future yabalaba Museveni identifies the enemies from fire and bagamba nga nti temusobola kunkanga wano mu state house if I'm a bad man yali badde yanda badda Museveni identifies the enemies from far nababuuza ekibuuzo kimu nembagandi when tell me when did Museveni reconcile with the Galuga after the sacking of Mbabazi or before the sacking of Mbabazi alagire bamuwene sente abanadi nti ali machayi yali ayawukanyako ne Mbabazi openire which one came first Museveni reconciled with the Galuga before he sacked Mbabazi yali yamumanya dda era mu kitabo kyange nkugamba nti Mbabazi Museveni yaprovokinga Mbabazi into battle n'atakitegeera Mbabazi batwala first lady of all places prime minister
Mbabazi amazembe yake 5 nga tali mu government ojo assessment kimba
no bano era basigala bagitabangula bw'osoma akatabo kange how Mbabazi protected his failed coup era ministry education era yali ntabangufu omwana ono mulenzi ye yagobanga banne gurupu y'abano bakutesa baani ye yali munda ngegobako Museveni abantu bonna ng'omukazi bwagoba abantu ewaka ate bamwetikke kati bagenda bakola ensobi banereegamu they don't know when I started capturing them entuuma eri bweti eya CDs ate nkyayiwayo neggulo nayiyeeyo nabawandikira akatabo kange kanebagamba mu magazini yange eno yaddi nti kani Museveni allow another case Besigye
ngani awedde kanwali otegeka
eno magazini yange njagala okulaba ennaku z'omwezi zizino waggulu nti kani Museveni allow another case Besigye
July 2014 July 2014 miaka mukaga tasobola kukkiriza Museveni
tasobola anti Besigye yamuyita wala nnyo ndika kusomera Besigye yasooka genda mu balukungiri group yadda katebe I read you how Besigye came nkulage nti wali mulala agenda kufuuka kiza Besigye Museveni will never allow another kiza Besigye kati alaba Besigye yamuyita wala nnyo tejeja kujjayo omutwe abakutesa basaaga uyo professor bejikulo gye basibye ekiro tupasodi
neba kutezo kwagala okufulia Museveni olwaleero babanja ki
abugagga bwabwe akazu kali ananyini ko they prefer their words nedda anti kati bayina okuba obugagga obukuuma goli mu buyinza nabagamba nti bamutya nti ajja bubasuuza kuba kati Museveni is shaping his retirement. I will read you what retiring president does. Tayinza kubawa kati oyo mujozi yomugwe alingiriza mulinga nkoko yagambye professor nti Kutesa nge milioni 2 zenalinde zitembeye ne professor amuyita sa kasauli ahona levo mukatambi akamu ne video akayita ye Kutesa katamanyi mwindi Kutesa yaja mu meeting ngayamba deka na kaba China ngayogeranga mukazi nenga ateba ne bamudamu hona levo nafe tugulire yo nkola milimo gya mukama mulome kunyigira ndalebe Kutesa yandabirira nyunga ninga mutabani nkola milimo gya mukama
honorable Kutesa ebintu byakolede
bingi nnyo
ebintu bingi mu
yes even ranga mi nedda we want peace ndikambabulire we want peace kine ekintu bajja kiyiwa government bana wacholi soma wona wacha wacholi bayiwa government kana kataba ngayita nakatuma nakalandika ndikakebere baja kuyiwa ekintu nafu tugwiremu wisdom of a fisherman nakawandika
kekana kasika bugali wisdom of a fisherman zikira musika bugali 16th January 2015 ngena kusomeza 16 January wa 2018 ndimyaka 5 jise
yes
uwe mansoma
wansu wali unateka maka
in 1984 the Democratic Party was split into two factions. The Acholi DP leaders they are actually DP leaders like Vice President Tiberi Okenyi and the Secretary General Ochaya were agitating for the removal of Semogerere, reasoning that the actually officers in the army were ready to overthrow Obote on condition that power is handed over to DP, but the leader should be an Acholi. This reminded the DP leaders what the actually officers had said before the 1980 elections. They had convinced DP leaders that they would overthrow the government in case of rigged elections. As I started my book, Uganda through the stormy 80s, this did not materialize. I gave 2 examples. On the 11th of December 1980, while at DP headquarters, I saw Dr. Semogerere with the British High Commissioner to Uganda together with Matthias Ngobi, who was going to be his vice president. They told the cheering crowd that they were heading to Paulo Muwanga's office to get the mantle of power since they had won the elections. At midday, we were perplexed to see Brigadier Basilio Olara Okello chasing us from the DP headquarters, saying that we should go home and wait for the election results since they will be read on radio. He gave us only 5 minutes to vacate the place. We obediently left because he was very heavily armed and in company of a number of soldiers who looked ready to shoot. This appeared strange to me, since the very man we, the DP supporters, had banked all our support on was the same one chasing us away. Earlier on, Dr. Semogerere had narrated to me an incident had narrated to me an incident where Tiberio ran to Semogerere's residence and hid under his bed. Reason being that Tiberio had used a public rally to attack Obote and security personnel were after him. Therefore, when Tiberio brought a rumor that the actually army officers wanted to remove Obote and hand over power to him, and that Semogerere was going to be stripped of the DP leadership, we smelt a rat. All the other DP leaders flat rejected the whole idea. Tiberio and Ochaya attacked Dr. Semogerere, accusing him of pocketing DP funds, which were donations from the party sympathizers, and selling a modern printing press that had been donated to the party to print Munansi, a party newspaper. On the printing press, Tiberio was right because it had been quietly sold off by the party treasurer, Evaristo Nyanzi. Tiberio and Ochaya left the party and formed their own Liberal Democratic Party. Gundi aliajizukiza Omugenzi Sebagala, Liberal Democratic Party. But when the Okellos overthrew Obote, they never handed over power to Tiberio Okenyi. It could be that Dr. Semogerere, who maintained closeness to Paulo Muwanga, was aware of the coup and knew that the coup plotters could not hand over power to the DP leadership, who they did not trust, or there was a split within the actual officers. The only thing that Okello had to do was to hoodwink the DP supporters, waving and singing songs that they wanted to enter Kampala. When Semogerere joined Paulo Muwanga's government as Minister of Internal Affairs, he had hoped that the government would end the war. NRM leaders had opened up contacts with Paulo Muwanga. It was in such meetings where Major Katabarwa was killed and Muwanga had agreed to remove all the Obote and enter into alliance with all the opposition groups. It is with this background that Paulo Muwanga became Executive Prime Minister, indicating and assuring those groups that he was in charge. However, it seemed that the NRM was playing tricks with the Okellos and the Paulo Muwanga. They knew that holding power would not be possible without Milton Obote. On the other hand, there was no way Museveni would share power with people whose hands were stained with human blood. Muwanga went ahead and formed a government with all political parties and fighting groups like Dr. Kaira's UFM and Nkwanga's FEDEVO. His arrangement was given a heavy blow by the NRM when they rejected an appointment in government he had formed without their involvement and consultation. The NRM was correct. Museveni had worked with Paulo Muwanga and other UPC fellows earlier during the UNLF days. He had seen how bureaucracy paralyzed the ruling government. Museveni under the NRM could not re-enter into a similar arrangement when he was sure of victory. This explains why the peace talks in Nairobi that resulted into the government of national unity were nipped in the bud. Museveni could not allow his victory on the front line to be taken away by the vanquished through diplomatic methods. The Okellos had been decisively defeated. In fact, when the NRA High Command heard that Museveni signed an agreement with Okello, they threatened to fight without Museveni. Therefore, Museveni could not throw away his victory, and that's why the Nairobi peace talks became peace jokes. For example, the Catholic prelate Cardinal Wamala Nsubuga received permission from the Pope. Received permission from the Pope to reconcile the two belligerents, but admitted that the mission was impossible because each side was suspicious of the other side. According to Chiwanuka, any government reached by Museveni would be rejected by the Okellos without even reading through it, and vice versa. Museveni was right to reject the peace talks because prior to the Bush War, the Acholis and the Langis had a strong bond. The Acholis believed that they were the best fighters in Uganda, and with Obote at the top, who was considered to be the wisest man in Uganda at the time. It was inconceivable that the two groups would fight each other. In fact, General Lutwa compared the bond between the Acholis and the Langis as that between a fox and a dog. As the Luwero war progressed, this bond was broken by mistrust between the two groups. Following the death of Brigadier Oito Jok, Obote refused to appoint the Acholi to appoint Anacholi as the Army Chief of Staff because of his deep mistrust. He instead appointed Smith Aponochak, who had no respect for the elderly Okellos. Smith's disrespect for the Okellos turned the army into the Acholis and the Langis, undermining the bond that Okello had described earlier. This explains why the Acholi soldiers decided to remove Obote. Thereafter, a fight over control of weapons ensued. In one incident, the Army Chief of Staff was stripped naked and beaten by the Acholi soldiers. Paulo Muwanga sarcastically said that this was a result of the uncoordinated movement of soldiers. The Okellos fled to the northern Uganda, and the Acholi senior officers like Eric Odua, who did not make it on time, were arrested. The Odua's nail was removed by the Langi officers. Obote had been tricked by the Okellos to allow a carriage of arms to pass through Uganda and not to South Sudan now, and these are the same weapons that were used to remove him from power. They were earlier attempts to reconcile the two tribes but failed, and Paulo Muwanga blamed Libya for this. This was a false accusation. Museveni's war was claiming more Acholis than the Langis. The former were seeing an end of war with their survivor. This is because it had been reduced to one man, Dr. Obote. It looked attractive to dispose of Obote and to end the war. When reconciliatory efforts between the Langis and the Acholis failed, Obote hatched a plan to kill Basil Okello. Interestingly, many Langi military officers who had married Acholi wives for their own hard work. So Obote offered to sack Smith Aponochak, subject him to military court-martial for indiscipline, and replace him with Brigadier Basilio, who was going to be promoted to the rank of a general. However, this was revealed by a drunken Langi officer to his Acholi wife, who relayed the information to Basilio Okello in a decoded message. In his message, she told Okello, in her message, I beg your pardon, She told Olara Okello that he was free to return to Kampala and talk to Obote. However, she further stressed that she should be mindful that the Acholi millet, she should be mindful about the Acholi millet.
Okello should be mindful.
It should be mindful, yes.
Not to take the Acholi millet.
It should be mindful because the Acholi millet could starve to death without it. To take the Acholi millet because it could starve to death without it. This is how Basilio survived Obote's assassination plan. When Obote failed in his attempt to eliminate Basilio Okello, he went to Luzira at night and offered money to detained soldiers to fight for him. Obote stooped too low and almost knelt before these criminal soldiers who committed heinous crimes like murder, rape, and robbery. Obote, they say that he was a minister of finance and that he would offer any amount of money to anybody who was ready to fight for him. He was pictured in a video and recorded with these criminals, and the interaction was broadcast on Uganda television, UTV at the time. This was a sign of desperation. First of all, the Okellos were closing in from the north, and these criminal officers just wanted to get back into normal life. The situation can be explained by three important factors of the time. Number one, the then chief intelligence officer who was in charge of NASA, the equivalent of today's ISO, Kasendwa Dumba, had already fled to Tanzania. Number two, when Obote contacted Mwanga, who was his vice president, on whether he was also in plans to run away, Mwanga boasted that he had come with one air ticket and he was not ready to test exile life again. He wished Obote a goodbye. Paulo Mwanga strongly believed that Obote was the only problem, that when getting rid of him would pave way for peace talks between UPC and NRA. Future events proved to him to the contrary. He was charged with treason, imprisoned, and later died before Obote's demise. Thirdly, Obote's early attempts to reconcile with the Okellos, either by offering Basilio a rank of a general and replacing upon a check, had failed. Also, the assassination plot on Basilio had been exposed by the Acholi woman. I think Obote's last call to Mwanga was intended to confirm that he was part of the conspiracy against him, not to call a concern. Mwanga had earlier formed UPC Uganda, one of the factions that tore the party into pieces. Mwanga issued 18 reasons supporting the necessity of a formation of UPC Uganda. Remember, Amin had given 18 reasons for the overthrow of Obote in 1971, presenting to the Obote the same number of reasons that Amin used against him in 1971. Mwanga was indirectly informing Obote that his government had gone back to 1971 situation, and that was the type, and that its time was up. In order to trim the wings of Paulo Mwanga, Obote transferred much of Mwanga's responsibility to Peter Otai, who was Minister of State for Defense. In order to save Obote's collapsing regime, Otai revived the Special Force Unit to counter the regular army, but whose members were from Teso, Otai's home area. When the force to demonstrate its military prowess in public through Kampala city, they were fired by the regular army. Mwanga defended the regular army attack, and they were not aware of this procession by the special unit, whose members were clad in uniforms not known to the army, that this was the cause of the attack. In a swipe that was intended to embarrass Mwanga, Aponacha commanded the attack on Namgongo shrines. Shrines are important monuments to the three religions in Uganda: the Catholics, the Protestants, and the Muslims. In his attack, soldiers raided the mosque, ransacked it, and took time to roast pork in the mosque. This is when Reverend Bazira, the person in charge of the shrines, was killed and left behind a pregnant wife. They ransacked the Catholic site, robbed it of all the valuables, and later Paulo Mwanga rushed the scene and apologized on behalf of the government. Mwanga pledged funds for rehabilitation of the three religious sites, a decision that Smith Aponachak did not support. He said that the army will continue with similar raids for as long as the country's security was at stake. He compared taking charge of the operation that caused a star on the international scene to Jesus, who turned the ropes into the wipes and chased the gamblers from the synagogue. Achak cautioned that an insect with An insect which mixes with the garbage offers itself to a delicacy to the scavengers. Oponachak stressed that the country, to the people's perception that Mwanga was a minister of defense, Mwanga was a minister of fundraising. He vowed on behalf of the army to return to the shrines in a similar situation if it arose. In fact, Simotha Oponachak joined the Tanzanian-backed Liberation War, having graduated from Greece, where he was sent by Amin. It was not surprising, therefore, that when Obote visited Acholi land, he was humiliated to stem the death of the Acholi soldiers. It was around this time that the Minister of Defense, Paulo Mwanga, went to Germany ostensibly for medical treatment. It was during this visit that he met the NRM official, including Chirunda Chive Jinja, a member of the NRM external wing. The NRM side insisted that any meaningful talks would be carried out when Obote had been thrown out of power. In order for Mwanga to prove that he was in charge, not Obote, another meeting was held in Kampala where NRM was represented by Major Katabarwa. However, all these that attended were killed except Paulo Mwanga. It is alleged that the killings were masterminded by Obote's loyalists under the command of Captain Namiti, who was the commanding officer of the Simba Battalion.
Why are you bringing it now? Abacholi government yawe bajesulira ibuka
olese kulaga byaliwo emyaka gino kitwogera ko jiri 3 musa
sichoka
emyaka 3 musa
yifa iruku back
these are 40 years
Uganda ono Museveni yafunye omukisa yekana abavumbagira ate bali esimye nnyo because Museveni is saving these people. They are not popular. In fact, Ugandans want Museveni to sort out these fellows, the mafia gang, not the mafia gang to sort out Museveni. Mwene mubbe mputa inundi ne mujiba ngegula milioni 5 noteka ukaba sinalangira gundi kadantini ataliyo ente z'olwalero nezedda ziriwe zali zisinga okulabirirwa bulungi lwakito zirwala nnyo nti ennyama mugitwala ebweru omusajja ayina ente ewuwo n'olumba akatale n'obba mukene nti abasajja ba takisi obabyeko emirimu n'oleeta baasi zo nga n'omukyala omulala aleeta baasi ze abantu mu kibuga babula emirimu oyo omukyala eyampeereza message eyo abansabira yagambye nti mwami Mirundi yogera ku kintu kino okimanyi nti ettaka liweddewo ba foreigners baligula especially mu Buganda and it is true. Abantu tebamanyi nti abayizeri bamala emyaka 6 nga tebali bwabwe hitira bwabakwatako n'abafuira omukko ogw'obutone bafa emitwalo 6 holocaust bagenda ku lusozi Zioni tebala bagita Zionism bagenda ku lusozi Zioni ne bagatudde waffe abayizeri okufuna ekitundu ekyo toka tebasangawo bantu it had already been occupied. You left 600 years ago. The Israelis, the Jews collected a lot of money. They went back to their area with a lot of money. Much of the land was bought. Abalabu babagulanga buguzi sente. Era okusikaza West Bank. Abalabu kye bakola kyali kimbaleeta akabazzi ng'omuwalabu atunda ettaka ekiro atunda ettaka emisana bamukuba akabazzi ku mutwe kwe kusigaza West Bank. Nje ndawulira no bwe balekana ku TV ne radio zaabwe na where do you get the knowledge? You underrating. You don't subject to ina knowledge yonna gwe okujja kugenda mu bitabu n'oku downloadinga n'otandika okulegesa n'olegezesa sawa 2 n'olegezesa sawa 3 waliwo program erika akalinza akaavu n'ekiwala ekibi era owegendi yagenze owegendi bamututte Museveni yakuganya okufumbirwa gwe Museveni yaganya okugula ebizike ebinyiriza abakazi
mukazi otegeera
kikazi kibi akalenzi nsi yakakuba kubadda bobuli lunaku nakati kwebali bayinsa itinga bantu waliwo akalalu akala kabeera okusawa nga 5 ne kale kakazanyira mu katemba close Minister of
ICT.
Yes, because tuchita libertarian theory. Libertarian theory mu America akugamba. Let everybody talk because people are knowledgeable. They can choose. nebano gabogo tomumanyi
nti abantu babejja kweronderamu
yes
banawuliza jagenda bawuliza ne gundu
gabogo boyogerako no funtule entama gabogo tomanyi Ivory Coast Ivory Coast
basoma bya Twitter
Ivory Coast yali nsinga eri makoko ne mwanyi Felix Begin yali president founding father ye yali talonda naga nti all Africans are the same, we are brothers. Zino boundaries zili artificial. Era bwosoma how these people wanted to unite Africa. Abo bagondi babayitanga bati abasekretule bani Uganda Red. Kakati yakiriza abantu ne bava mu apavolota eyali mu north banji ne bayingira mu Ivory Coast. Oyo Katara yali citizen wa Burkina Faso apavolota yagenda mu World Bank na IMF as a citizen of which IMF of Burkina Faso kati nga inayo munni omulala bwe baavuganyanga ennyo mu government yenga abataddewo babiri the police at that time omukulembeze agenda okuwumula yajjanga y'abantu babiri tukiyita bipolar nti Bulingi Museveni Bulingi Mbabazi and Bukenya tukiyita bipolar Russia na America. Then you ensure stability. The government was more stable when Mbabazi and Bukenya were still in the government. Why? Bekubanga boka Museveni nakola emirimo gye. The remove of the two zayamba bano kuba Museveni batuyamba n'abategeera
entalo zalinga ne Bukenya
tukiyita bipolar nti ne Nyerere yaleeta Ahmed Salim n'aleeta ne Sokoine nga be batunulidde bati naye Nyerere Ahmed Salim bwe yava mu African Union tamanyi gye yalaga Sokoine bamutira mu accident Edward Sokoine era ina Sokoine University you put two people ate yemmo iwarole yamale emyaka omusamu nga talina vice bobo vice babulwaniranga nabujjawo ne gunde ono wa Egypt yali tayina vice
Muhammad
ono gundi Mubaraka omanyi Mubaraka Nasabu yafa Mubaraka yali vice president kakati nga babagamba nga bamujerega nti yalonda musiru a man was surrounded in Sinai uyu Mubaraka yali azanya kyovola nti bwe balwawo muganda ganti bwolwa ku lubimbi olinya jogize these are celebrated generals tewali mu Sudan muntu yagezaako kuwa Southern Sudan independence batamujjako izonule Bashir nti Bashir yeta ina mwana yabakwata nabaga nti mujje tugende mu South amasomero gagalewo buli family ne rozaako bwe yabaga nti tutese bakkiriza nera bebe Singapore ati mugondi yes ne bata history ugondi uyu yali muvuzi wa nyonyi Mubaraka he was surrounded in Sinai na
amanyi nnyo ngona alikuwa yamudiri yafatana
kakati yembale nkugamba nti Gabugo
bana basomesa ba Gabugo
Bafaransa Gabugo Abafaransa Ivory Coast bagamba Abafaransa batwala koko waffe ne bamukola mwani chocolate kati batu tumubasasuzo batu mukolere wano ne Tanzania Nyerere yali akoze factory yengato zabula azigula kakati bana abazalirana bagabugo nga bagala Abafaransa bategedde nti bababba Abafaransa kukuleeta ono and 50% of the population in Ivory Coast bafuluki abafuluki be bajja obuzinga bw'oli abanyoronga bagamba abakiga nti bafuluki kakati oyo aleekaana ne Gabugo tamanyi na political landscape ngalabi yokka n'aleega engalabi businga buleega ngalabi naye nga anti tebumanyi anti research make research ne buleega engalabi ne bumading up waters no anti kyenkubuulira analyze don't narrate tumala googera
okay omukukula tubano padde bwino njagala tukomewo nga tuvudde mirango ompe ku analysis yo ku msango gwa hamu bakola state of execution nakyo kiwunyisa mu nkola yakyo
yes buli mukazi yenna ajoze gwanga lino ngoyo omukazi yagenda n'ajoga abantu najjayo mbusimanyi principal judge abakazi bonna abajoze enseno bajja kwatibwa ng'enseeteredde bateekebwe butabika mu basajja abalalu babagalireyo babakoleko facolarization nga bano ab'obubina buli mukazi yenna ajoza anti fako buli mukazi yenna ajoza abantu n'abaawuzaamu olugaayo ensinga eteredde wakuteekebwa butabika mu basajja abalalu bamutereeza akabina
kakati tunaba tukomyewo njagala togera ku nsonga eyo opere ku analysis okukina ekiriwo ekya abekika kyembogo nakyo waggulu ne wansi abekika kyembogo abakubidwa buti ya gasi abanupu babayigirira ne bayola ebintu byabwe ebyambalo byonna bucha abantu bagenze babiwayo mpolampola of course era police bagisomoza ne bagamba nti ngabo babijje ku Bobi Wine katoba n'abalala nabibajjako babucha bannabalala bano
kukyalo bwe kuvaako omwana gwe basaddaase sebo kukyalo bwe kuvaako omwana gwe basaddaase balumba sabo obeekereziya oba kanisa
sabuli balumba
nupu sabo gye balumba bali